Today we'll be speaking to Shahrukh Marfatia, who completed his master's in personnel management and industrial relations at Tata Institute of Social Sciences. And he was an accomplished HR professional in Singapore while having decades of experience in over 6 countries at leading companies such as Shell, Nokia, HSBC, Bank of America, and TCS. So, Shahrukh, to start off, could you tell us how fresh graduates today can stand out during the recruitment process in today's competitive job environment?
Yeah, pleasure, Sean, and thanks for having me on your channel. So first of all, I'd start by saying that whatever you do, whether it's a career in HR or whether it's a career in any other function, I would say one has to be yourself. You have to know yourself and make sure that you are who you are, and people or recruiters recruit you for the quality that you bring to the table. Second of all, I'd say, particularly for a career in HR, is that you have to be really clear that HR is your calling and it's your career that you really want to pursue. The reason being that I always learned early in my career that HR career is like that of a good general practitioner doctor who really cares and very empathetic about his patients. And similarly, in HR, should be very caring and empathetic for our clients, which is really the people, including our peers, our superiors, our people who report to us, and our stakeholders outside the organization. The third thing I would suggest is that they say network, 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 but I think more than just networking, I think it's the real relationships that you build with people, that people who have known you, who have worked with you academically or in your profession, who I find to be the best sponsors and mentors for one's own selection through an organization. Also, I think the cover letter fit for purpose for fresh HR graduates, assuming they're not being picked on the campuses, would be to have a very clear cover letter that tailors the application to the job specifications and the person specifications. Typically, we call it job description and person specs. So you have to be really clear that you connect with those key elements of the job as well as the requirements of the individual. Next, a very obvious is really the showcasing of your CV. It has to be absolutely authentic and always true, and it's very important that you also then highlight there your achievements. It's not just a rundown of what you've done. Especially when you're fresh, you don't have much to talk about, but where you are able to talk about your internships, your leadership experience, your organizational experience, I think it's very key to highlight that, especially the work X. So, the way that employers look at is to see, why should I select this person versus a fresh graduate? So that always brings, I believe, a little bit of an edge to the selection process for a fresh grad who's done some good internships. And of course, like I was sharing with you earlier, preparation is everything. You have to be really, really prepared for any interaction you have with anyone, any stakeholder, and particularly when you are in a recruiting, interviewing situation where you absolutely want to be prepared. You want to know the organization, you want to know the role, you want to know the ramifications of what it will take. You want to understand the career, what are the value propositions you bring to the organization, and more importantly, what also the organization can offer you to have a good longer-term fit. I think that's extremely important. And lastly, everyone knows this, particularly youngsters today who know how to crack the keywords. Now, there are 10 keywords that recruiters look at. I'm not going to necessarily give you an exhaustive list, but I sort of picked up a few which I think are very important personally. I think the most important is interpersonal skills, leadership experience, collaborative nature, being adaptable, and then, of course, the more canned stuff, which is being innovative, being a problem solver. But I would add two which I feel are the most important. One, which is hard worker. I think that's the most important aspect that one has to genuinely be and bring to the table. And lastly, being results and performance driven. So I would say these are some of the key words that if you do prescribe to that and you do believe that you are them, then I would say that you should highlight that.
Thank you so much for that insight. I think, especially with today's job market, people mainly try and focus on applying to as many jobs as they can without actually trying to tailor their resume and cover letter. I think that's some great advice on being able to show recruiters that you have those transferable skills. So, just to add on to that as a question, uh, what do you think HR departments are looking for when you have those conversations with them, and you're trying to network with people within the organization, apart from being hardworking, uh, creative, good at communication. And when it comes to having skill sets in a career in human resources management, what would you advise students to see what they're good at when pursuing a career in human resources?
Sure. So I think first question was more generic, which is, how do you get recruited? How do you interest the recruiters to select you? And the second part perhaps is more towards the HR management aspect of it, or the people management aspect as the function is now being known. As you said, 40 years ago, when I did my master's, it was personnel management and industrial relations. It's then graduated to human resources, and now more and more chief people officer being the highest title in this profession. So to your question, what are the skill sets that you would require in people or HR management today? I would start with one which I feel is the most important, having been the CHRO of a global business at Shell of 120 billion US dollars in those Fortune 50 company just by ourselves if we were a standalone company. And my reflection over the years and the biggest learning I have is that in HR people, we all tend to think that you have to be very soft, feely, touchy. Yes, I think that's a very important criterion and a very important quality and a table stake. You have to have that to be in human resources in the first place. But I think what's more and the most important in my book is really having a clear understanding of the business, knowing your business, what it is, what industry you are in, who are your competitors, not just your profit and loss, that is, what is your top line and what are your expenses and therefore your net profit and the exceptionals, and not that simpler profit and loss side. But very often I've learned that it's the balance sheet side of the house that makes or breaks a company. You could have a lot of debt, you could have lots of credit, which is being given to suppliers, or we are ourselves working on very tight schedules to receive money, like 90 days instead of 30 days. And I learned in my business alone, if we had just shortened the credit cycle by 1 day, our business would save $130 million a year. So, that's the kind of magnitude that we should be aware of, the business dynamics that really shape the money. And most importantly, how this business makes money. We are in the business of helping the business to be successful through our skill sets on the HR and people management side. So that brings me to the second side, which is really the people and HR management side. I think that obviously, as a fresh graduate, one gets a good working knowledge of all the areas of HR. If I was to simplify it, I'd say people attraction or talent attraction, development, retention, and engagement, or engagement and retention. So all of those aspects, right from talent acquisition to talent management to performance management, to identification of potential, talent development, succession planning, which is a big thing even at boards today. One of the things that keeps us up at night is who's going to be our next CEO, who's going to be our next C-suite. And I think we spend a lot of time in many boards really looking at succession, particularly of the CEO and the C-suite, but at the group level. So I think that being aware of all the functional areas is a table stake. But the most important success factor, I think, is that edge that you bring as a business person first, rather than just knowing your HR skill sets and HR suite. The third thing I would say is that, to my surprise, working with a lot of CHROs as my mentees and so on, one of the things I find intriguing is that many of them do not know the difference between a people agenda or strategy and a HR agenda or strategy. They seem to think it's the same thing. Actually, no. We as managers, or we as executives in the functions should be really working with the line leaders to manage their people. People don't report to us, they report to the line managers. So how do we enable the line managers to be the people managers? Because I learned early in my career that you can make HR redundant if your line managers were really doing the jobs of managing their people as best as they can. So there, I would say all of you would have heard of Dave Ulrich, and I'm a big fan, I have to confess, of him. And a long time ago, he espoused this model, which is people management or people agenda is done through the leaders through four very key areas. The first is talent and people development. The second is leadership and team development. The third is culture, setting the right culture. What culture does this organization need, our business need, and how do we go around shaping that culture to really come to fruition? And also then capability building. So that's the three key areas that I think are most important. And I would add a fourth one, which I alluded to, which is around the whole employee engagement, use of data, AI, and those kind of skills, which are now becoming table stakes in many functions. And the last thing I'll say, Sean, is that the soft skills are very important in HR, and that's where what the initial general comments around leadership and communicational skills and collaboration and adaptability, all that is important. But I want your viewers to know that, remember this mantra: soft drives hard. Soft skills drive hard results. Very often, business leaders tend to feel that if they have a very driving style, everybody will follow. But leadership is about willing followers. So how do you create that skill set in our line managers, which is also the crux of the people agenda? And lastly, I'd say you can't control luck, you can't control timing. So the only thing one can control, especially as young graduates and in the younger part of our careers, is hard work. There is no substitute for hard work. We can't control much, as you will all learn in your careers, except the input that you put in, which is your hard work.
Thank you so much for that advice. I think it's really helpful for our viewers to know that, when it comes to a business, it's also important for the HR department to retain employees, boost motivation and morale. And yeah, I think in the last few years and last couple of months, even with, remote working, hybrid learning, I think retaining employees and even being able to stand out to employees is extremely important. So thank you so much for that insight on the skills required when it comes to being in human resources. Soft skills always being very important to drive hard skills, hard technical skills. So thank you for that. And my last question would be, when it comes to as you said, your degree was in personnel management and industrial relations, and over the last 30 to 40 years it's really evolved to human resources, where you have facets of psychology as well, and today's masters of human resource degrees. So what are some of the career opportunities you've seen graduates or professionals pursue upon getting a degree in human resources or industrial relations, apart from getting into human resources?
Yeah, so I think it's quite important to be a good HR professional, to have some HR degree. I feel in some countries, HR education has been around, like in the UK and the US, for almost a century, in some way, shape, or form. In some countries, more nascent and not that developed and mature. But I think it's more and more important that HR and people management is a very important vertical that people need specialized qualifications. So I'd say an undergrad degree or even a master's, if you really want to get some respect and look line leaders and your peers eye to eye, I think even a master's degree would not be out of line. But it's always good to do what you feel is important, and then get into the profession, and then probably do advanced studies in that. So I think it's a must. The HR degrees is a must. I think to your question, what's the opportunities? I think that HR has as much opportunities to be at an executive table right at the early days, all the way to the highest level, when you are in the ultimate C-suite, which is the chief people officer or the chief human resources officer, working with the CEO and the MD of the organization or of the entire group. So I feel that, like any other function, if HR is considered to be a serious profession, which I think we are in the business of making the business successful and developing and motivating and engaging our people, then I think that it's a fantastic suite to get into. And I think if you perform with hard work, your talent, and your potential, and you realize all of this, and you deliver everything that's asked for you, you put up your hand and show the initiative and take on projects, and really do whatever it takes to kind of knock it out of the park, as they say, then I think to get to the highest echelons of the organization is not far flung.
Thank you so much for your time. I think this advice and tips for students will really be helpful for those looking to get into HR, or even trying to see how they can, stand out in the job application process. So yeah, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it, and all the best.
Thank you, and to you too.